The notice had been up since Wednesday, and by Friday morning Gideon Marsh had 3 responses and no cook. The first had been a woman of 60 who could not travel the 9 miles from town without a conveyance he was not in a position to provide on a daily basis. The second had been a man, which was not what he had asked for, and which had surprised him enough that he had stood in the doorway holding the letter for a moment before he understood the situation. The third had withdrawn the same afternoon she expressed interest, having accepted a position in town that suited her better and required no explanation beyond the fact of its existence. Sunday was 2 days away. He had 11 men arriving for the harvest on Sunday morning who would need 3 meals a day for 14 days and would not work well on short meals any more than his horses would work well on short rations. He had known this was coming for 6 weeks and had believed until Wednesday that he had it managed. The woman who had agreed to come in July had written in September to say she had married and would not be coming, and he wished her well and had put the notice up immediately, and it was now Friday morning and he had nothing to show for it. He was standing in the kitchen looking at the state of the provisions when his daughter came downstairs. Lily was 8 years old, and she had her mother's eyes and the particular self-possessed quality of a child who has been managing herself for a year and a half and has gotten very good at it and wishes she did not have to be. She looked at her father standing in the kitchen with the expression he wore when something was not working out, and she looked at the kitchen and she put her coat on. "I'm going to Mrs. Birch," she said. He looked at her. "She'll know someone," Lily said. "She knows everyone." She went out before he could answer. He stood in the kitchen and watched her cross the yard through the window, a small figure in a blue coat, moving with the certain purpose of someone who has identified the problem and the solution and sees no reason to delay. He thought, "She is 8 years old." He thought, "She is right." Gideon Marsh was 37 years old and had been a widower for a year and a half, and the year and a half had been the kind of time that does not soften into anything but simply accumulates, day by day, into a life that keeps moving, because it must whether you have the energy for it or not. He had kept the farm moving. He had kept Lily fed and clothed and in school. He had managed the harvest last year with a neighbor's help, and the year before that with Clara still alive, and the understanding that she was there at the center of everything, the point from which the rest of it radiated, the person who made it possible for him to give his full attention to the land because she was giving hers to everything else. Clara had been the kind of woman who made a large household look easy, not because it was easy, but because she was very good at it and did not call attention to the work. He had understood this while she was alive, in the way you understand things you have always had, incompletely, without urgency, with the comfortable assumption that they will continue. He understood it now with the full weight of everything that understanding had cost him, which was considerable and ongoing. He was not a man who fell apart. He was not a man who stopped working or let the farm go. He was a man who kept moving, because stopping was not something he had learned to do, and grief had not taught him, only given him more to move through. He did not talk about the parts that were hard. He had managed, for a year and a half, with the competence of someone who has no alternative to competence, and has made a kind of peace with that. The part he had not managed was Lily. He had managed the logistics of Lily without difficulty. She was fed and schooled, and her coat was the right size for the season, and she had what she needed in every material sense. What he had not managed was the thing underneath the logistics, which was that she was 8 years old, and she had lost her mother. And she was doing what he was doing, keeping moving, managing, not talking about the parts that were hard. And she was 8 years old and should not have to know how to do any of that yet. He saw it in small things. The way she set the table without being asked, not cheerfully, but with the sober efficiency of someone fulfilling a responsibility. The way she went quiet when they passed the Halloran place, where Clara had had a close friend, and said nothing and looked at the road. The way she made her own bed every morning to a standard that would have satisfied a much older person, because no one had asked her to, and she had decided at some point he had not witnessed that it was her job now. He saw it in the dog question. She had asked him in July, carefully, and once he remembered the care of it, the way she had framed it as a small, practical question. Nothing large, whether he thought they might get a dog. He had said maybe in the spring, and she had said all right, and she had not asked again. He thought about it sometimes in the evenings. He understood that it had not been about a dog. He did not know what to do with the understanding. She needed something he did not know how to give. He had known it for months, and the knowing sat in him the way the things he did not talk about always sat, quietly, with considerable weight, waiting for him to find what to do with it. He was standing in the kitchen thinking about the harvest provisions when his daughter went to find him a cook. He let her go because she was right about Mrs. Birch, and because he did not have a better idea, and because watching Lily move through the world with that certain, self-possessed purpose was both the thing that made him most proud of her and the thing that troubled him most. In the way that a child being too capable too early is something a parent can see clearly and not easily remedy. The woman's name was June Mallister, and she arrived at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon with a canvas bag and a flour sack and an expression that said she had assessed the situation and found it manageable, which was the first thing Gideon had seen in 2 days that gave him any real comfort. She was 32 years old. A fact she offered without being asked when he asked how long she had been cooking for harvest crews, in the way of a woman who understands that her age is information relevant to her qualifications and does not see why it should be withheld. She had been cooking for harvest crews since she was 24, which was 8 years, which was longer than he had been running this particular farm. And she said this matter-of-factly, and he believed her because nothing about her suggested otherwise. She had never married. She did not say this. He did not ask. He learned it from Mrs. Birch's note, which had accompanied June's own letter and which Mrs. Birch had written with the particular thoroughness of a woman who believes that relevant information should be provided even when it has not been explicitly requested. The note had said, June Mallister is a capable woman of good character who has made her living cooking for harvest and threshing crews for 8 years and is looking, in Mrs. Birch's opinion, for a situation that might lead to something more settled. Mrs. Birch had underlined more settled. Gideon had set the note in the kitchen drawer and not thought about it. He showed her the kitchen, which was large and well equipped because Clara had known what a kitchen needed and had insisted on getting it, and June went through it with the systematic attention of a woman taking inventory of a workspace she is preparing to inhabit. She opened the flour barrel and the lard tin. She checked the oven's drawer. She looked at the water situation and asked about the pump, and he said it was reliable, and she nodded. Lily came in from school at 5:30. She stopped in the kitchen doorway the way she always stopped in doorways first, assessing before committing, and she looked at June Mallister at the stove with the same look she had given every new situation in the past year and a half, which was careful and contained and told you nothing except that she was thinking. June turned from the stove. She looked at Lily with the full attention of someone who has noticed a person and is not going to pretend she hasn't. "You must be Lily," she said. "Yes," Lily said. She looked at June. "You're the cook." "For the harvest," June said. 14 days. Lily nodded. She came in and hung her coat on the peg and set her school things on the bench, and she went to the table and sat down, and she watched June work with the focused, silent attention she brought to everything she was learning. She watched June for a while. Then she said, "Do you know how to make apple cake?" Gideon, who had been at the table with the harvest accounts, looked up. "I do," June said. Lily looked at the table. "My mother used to make it on Fridays," she said. She said Fridays needed something to look forward to. The kitchen was quiet for a moment. Not the silence of a thing being avoided, the silence of a thing being received. June did not say she was sorry. She did not say something bright over the top of it to move past it quickly. She turned back to the stove, and she said, "That's a sound philosophy. Fridays do need it." Something in Lily's face settled. Not relief, exactly, not happiness. The particular quality of a child who has said a true thing about the person they have lost and had it received as what it was, rather than stepped around or managed or folded immediately into reassurance. She looked at the table. She ate her supper. Gideon sat with the harvest accounts open in front of him and did not see them. He looked at his daughter and at the woman at his stove, and he thought about the thing that was in the room, the thing Lily had offered, tentatively. And June had accepted without making it larger than it was. And he thought, this is what Lily has needed. Not someone to fix anything. Someone to receive it. He set his pencil down and sat for a while without pretending to work. The harvest went well. It went well in the way that harvests go well, when the weather holds and the crew is experienced, and the person feeding them knows what they need before they ask for it. June Callister's kitchen ran on a logic that the crew understood within the first morning. Meals at the right times, enough of everything, no nonsense, no shortage. She fed 14 men 3 times a day, and she did it without complaint and without asking Gideon questions that should not need asking, which told him she had looked at the operation and understood it before she needed to be told what it required. He watched her work the way he watched things he was trying to understand. She was efficient, without hurry. She planned ahead in the way that separated a good cook from a merely capable one. The larder was never suddenly depleted because she was depleting it in a controlled sequence that kept the supply always ahead of the need. She handled the crew the way she handled the stove, directly, without excess, with the kind of steady authority that comes from knowing the job well enough that the job is not complicated. The men did not test her, which was either a sign of their good character or her competent management of the first morning, and he suspected the latter. She was also, in the margins of the work, paying attention to Lily, not in a way that announced itself. Lily was not a child who welcomed being attended to by someone she did not yet know, and June seemed to understand this without being told, the same way she understood things about the kitchen, by looking before speaking. She gave Lily room. She asked her questions that had real answers, which route to the schoolhouse was shorter, whether the well pump needed the handle lifted on the upstroke. She received Lily's answers as what they were, the considered information of a person who lived here and knew things about it, and not as small talk to be gotten through. When Lily brought her schoolwork to the kitchen table in the evenings, June worked around her the same way she worked around the stove's temperamental left burner, noting it, making the adjustment, not calling attention to the accommodation. Gideon watched all of this from the edge of his awareness in the way he watched his daughter, carefully, and from a slight distance, because Lily did not like to be watched directly, and he had learned this. On the third Friday, June made apple cake. She made it in the afternoon, after the midday meal and before the supper preparations. The smell of it moved through the house in the way that baking does in October when the windows have been closed against the first real cold, filling the rooms with a warmth that was not only heat. Lily came in from school and stopped in the doorway. She always stopped in doorways first, and Gideon saw her face do the thing he had no name for. It was not grief. Precisely, it was what grief leaves behind in specific places. The smell of a thing that belonged to a person who was gone, arriving without warning, before the mind has prepared itself. June slid the cake from the oven and set it on the board to cool. "You can have a piece when it's cooled enough," she said, without turning. About an hour. Lily sat down at the table. She took out her schoolwork and she opened her slate and she did her letters and her sums for an hour without speaking, in the kitchen with the cooling cake and June starting supper at the stove. And at the end of the hour, June cut 2 pieces and set one in front of Lily and kept the other for herself and sat down across from her. They ate the cake together at the kitchen table in the early dark of an October evening. Gideon came in from the barn and saw them there through the window before he reached the door, Lily with her piece half-eaten, looking at the table with the expression of someone considering whether the feeling they are having is one they are allowed to have. He stood outside for a moment in the cold. He came in and hung his coat and said nothing. Neither did they. The harvest ended on a Thursday, 2 days ahead of schedule, because the weather had held and the crew had been efficient. Gideon paid the men, and they dispersed in the Thursday afternoon light, and the farm went quiet in the way a farm goes quiet after 14 days of full production, suddenly and absolutely, and with the particular emptiness of something that has been full. June's arrangement was for 14 days, and the 14 days were done. He found her in the kitchen on Thursday evening, after the last man had gone, going through the larder with the methodical attention she brought to everything. She was taking stock of what remained, he understood, making a list, leaving things in order. She was doing what a person does when they are preparing to go. He had known the arrangement was for 14 days. He had thought about this every day for the last week. He had not thought about it clearly, which was unusual for him. He was generally a man who thought about things clearly. What he had thought instead was that there was something he needed to say, and he had not found the shape of it, and the days had passed without the shape arriving, and now it was Thursday evening and she was taking stock. "Stay for supper," he said. It was not what he had meant to say. She looked at him. "Lily would like it," he said. This was true, and was not what he meant either. June held his eyes for a moment, and he thought she was going to say something about the arrangement and the 14 days and the understanding they had had. Instead, she turned back to the larder. "There's enough salt pork for a good supper," she said. "And the last of the potato bin." He built the fire up while she cooked. Lily came downstairs and sat at the table and said nothing about the fact that June was still there, which meant she had known June was still there before she came downstairs, and had decided not to make it a question. They ate supper together, the 3 of them, at the kitchen table that had been feeding 14 men for 2 weeks and was now the right size again. Lily ate and listened to the conversation between Gideon and June about the harvest yields and the winter pasture plan and the question of the barn roof on the west side, and she did not contribute much to this conversation, but she was entirely present in it, the way a child is present in adult conversation when the adults have forgotten to be performing and are simply talking. After supper, June washed and Gideon dried, the same as he had done with Clara, and it was not the same as Clara because nothing was the same as Clara, and he had stopped expecting it to be, but it was a thing 2 people did together in a kitchen at the end of a day, and it was good. He had been thinking for a week about what to say, and the shape of it had not arrived, and so he said what was true, which was the only kind of saying he knew how to do. "Lily asked me last month if we might get a dog," he said. He kept his eyes on the plate he was drying. She asked once and didn't ask again. "I've been thinking about why she didn't ask again." June was quiet. She handed him the next plate. "I think she knew asking didn't help," he said. "I think she's known that for a while, about more than the dog." June looked at the water in the basin. "Children learn that," she said. "When the people they depend on are doing their best and still coming up short, children stop asking. They think it's kinder." She paused. "It is kinder. It is also not good for them. She's been learning things too early for a year and a half," he said. He set the plate on the stack. He looked at the October dark through the window, the harvest done, the farm gone quiet, winter coming in the way it came in this part of Nebraska, which was direct and without negotiation. He had not been able to find the shape of what he needed to say, and standing there at the window he understood why. There was no elegant shape for it. There was only the thing that was true. I put up a notice for a cook, he said. I needed a cook. That was true, and I'm not going to pretend it wasn't. He set down the drying cloth. It was also not the whole of what was true. June handed him the last cup and did not say anything. She dried her hands and set the cloth on the rack and turned and looked at him with the full, level attention she had been giving things since she arrived, the attention of a woman who does not look at things casually and does not look away when the looking gets complicated. He waited because he had said the true thing, and it was hers to answer in her own time. And he was a man who could wait when waiting was what was required. I read notices for what they say and what they don't say, she said. 14 years of harvest work teaches you that. A man who needs a cook by Sunday says one thing with those words. He says another thing by how the house looks when you arrive, and how his daughter sets the table, and whether the kitchen was kept or let go. She looked at the kitchen around her, the one she had managed for 2 weeks, and had gotten to know the way she got to know all kitchens, by working in them until they told her their character. This kitchen was kept. Imperfectly, but kept. By a man doing more than his share, and a child doing more than hers. She looked at him. Mrs. Birch said your daughter was a serious child, doing too much carrying for her age, she said. I came for the 14 days because it was honest work and a fair wage. I have been thinking for a week about whether I am the kind of woman who leaves when 14 days are done, knowing what I leave behind. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, the wind was finding the eaves, the first real wind of what would be a long winter. I am not that kind of woman, June said. I have been trying to decide if that is my problem or yours. He looked at her. I think it is neither, she said. I think it is simply what is true, and true things have to be dealt with whether or not they are convenient. He was quiet for a long moment. The stove ticked. The wind pressed at the window, and the window held. June, he said, her name in the kitchen, plainly, without dressing it. She waited. I need to ask you something, he said, and I want to ask it right, which means saying first that I am not asking you to take on anything you haven't chosen. Not Lily, not this place, not any of it. If the right answer is that you go, I will say so and mean it. He looked at the table. But if you were to stay, not for 14 days, but to stay and see what this is, the three of us, I think it is something worth seeing. I am not certain yet what it is. I am not going to say I am certain when I am not. She was looking at him the way she had looked at the kitchen on the first afternoon, the honest, systematic attention of a woman taking stock of something she is being asked to inhabit. I would need time, she said. I know that. I would need to be here as myself, not as a solution, not as a replacement for something. As who I am. Yes, he said. That is what I am asking for. She was quiet a moment longer. Ask Lily about the dog, she said. He looked at her. In the morning, ask her. Tell her spring is too long to wait. She held his eyes. She needs to know you are paying attention. That is the first thing. He thought about Lily asking once and not asking again. He thought about her sitting at the table for an hour, not moving, not asking. Waiting for the cake to cool with the patient endurance of a child who has learned to expect that things take the time they take. All right, he said. All right, June said. She did not say she was staying. She did not say she was going. She picked up the dishcloth and hung it on the rack where it belonged, and she said good night and went to the room off the kitchen, and Gideon stood in the kitchen for a while after she had gone. The house had been full for 2 weeks and was quiet now, but not in the way it had been quiet before she came, and he thought about what she had said about the first thing, and he thought, she is right. She is right about all of it. He asked Lily about the dog in the morning. before school, while June was at the stove and the kitchen was warm with the first real cold of the season pressing at the windows. He sat down across from his daughter at the table, and he said it plainly. The way she always said things, he had been thinking about the dog, and spring was too long to wait, and what did she think about looking for one before winter? Lily looked at him. She looked at June at the stove, who was not looking at either of them, and was very present in the room. She looked back at her father. "A medium one," she said. "Not too small." "They don't do well in the cold." "All right," he said. "Medium, the Pearson farm has a dog that had pups in August," Lily said. "Mrs. Pearson told me. She said they were good dogs." He looked at his daughter, who had been holding this information since August, who had known where the pups were and had said nothing about it because she had learned that asking didn't help and had been waiting, in her patient way, to see if circumstances changed. Circumstances had changed. "We'll go Sunday," he said. Lily ate her breakfast. She did not make a ceremony of it. She ate with the focused appetite of a child who has received what she needed and can now attend to her eggs. When she finished, she went to get her coat. She stopped at the kitchen doorway and looked at June. "Will you be here when I get home?" she said. June set down the spoon she was holding. She turned and looked at Lily directly, the full attention, unhurried. "Yes," she said. "I'll be here." Lily held her eyes for a moment, the way she held everything she was assessing. Then she turned and put on her coat, all the buttons done up in order, the way she did everything, and she picked up her school things. At the door she paused. She looked back at the kitchen, her father at the table, June at the stove, the warm room and the frost on the grass outside the window. "It's getting cold," she said. "You should make the apple cake again. Fridays are better with something to look forward to." She went out. The door settled behind her. The kitchen held the two of them and the smell of breakfast and the first frost morning outside, and the sound of Lily's boots on the porch steps going down, and then the yard, and then gone toward the road. June looked at Gideon. He looked at her. There was nothing to say that the morning had not already said for them. Lily had said it with a question about a dog and an instruction about apple cake and a door closing behind her, and she had been 8 years old and she had said everything. June turned back to the stove. He poured his coffee. Outside, the frost lay on the grass in the particular still way of the first cold morning of a long winter, each blade separate and bright, the whole field of it holding the light. Inside, the kitchen was warm and the stove was right, and something that had been missing from this house for a year and a half was not missing anymore. And they both knew it, and they let it be what it was without naming it yet. Because some things are better when you let them arrive in their own time.